What if I told you that one of Johnny Depp's most powerful and haunting questions isn't from a courtroom battle, a Hollywood script, or even a lyric from a song, but from his own real life? The question is simple, yet it carries a heavy weight. Why do you come if you can't stay? At first, you might hear that and think it's just a dramatic line, maybe something poetic or metaphorical. But when you sit with it for even a moment, it hits differently. Think about it. Haven't you felt that before? Haven't you had someone enter your world with so much promise, so much light, so much impact only for them to vanish? And you're left with memories, with echoes, with questions. The biggest one being, why even come if you couldn't stay? This isn't just a romantic idea. It's not just about love or heartbreak. It's about life. It's about family, friends, careers, opportunities, even moments that feel like they'll last forever. But don't, and that's exactly why this phrase, this simple yet heavy question, feels so deeply tied to Johnny Depp's life. Because if you look closely, this theme, people coming and going, trust being given and then broken, doors opening only to close again, has followed him through his entire journey. So today, we're not just looking at Johnny Depp the actor. We're not just revisiting Captain Jack Sparrow or Edward Scissorhands or his other iconic roles. We're stepping into Johnny Depp's world as a man who's lived through towering highs and devastating lows. A man who's experienced love that felt permanent but turned fragile. A man who's been celebrated by Hollywood only to be rejected by it when times got tough. And through all of it, that one question seems to echo in the background. Why do you come if you can't stay? Now let's start where the story feels most personal. His relationships. Johnny Depp has lived much of his life under the gaze of the public eye. And with that, his romantic relationships have often been the stuff of headlines. Remember his young love with Winona Ryder? They weren't just a couple. They were the couple of the early 90s. Fans loved them. Paparazzi chased them. People talked about them as if their love was some kind of fairy tale. It seemed permanent. It seemed untouchable. So much so that Johnny tattooed Winona forever on his body. Tattoos aren't just ink. They're symbols. They're commitments. They're saying, this is so important, I want it marked on me forever. But what happens when forever turns into something temporary? Their love ended, and suddenly, Winona forever became Wino forever. And doesn't that just perfectly describe the pain of something you thought would last but didn't? What once felt eternal turned into a reminder of what couldn't stay. Then came Vanessa Paradis. For years their love seemed steady, grounded, safe. They built a family together. 2 children. A home in France. For many this felt like Depp's true anchor, the relationship that might hold despite the storms of fame. But after over a decade that chapter too closed. Not with drama, not with explosions, but with quiet separation. And again, someone who came in and shaped his world did not stay. And then, of course, the marriage to Amber Heard. That chapter unfolded not just in private, but under the harshest spotlight imaginable. Trials, accusations, media frenzies, suddenly the entire world was watching, taking sides, judging. And in that chaos, another bond, once promised as love, dissolved into something painful, bitter, unforgettable. Another case of someone coming, changing everything, and then leaving behind scars. But here's the thing. This theme isn't limited to his love life. It stretches into his career, too. Think about Johnny's Hollywood journey. He started as an outsider, someone who didn't fit the usual mold of a leading man. He took on weird roles, quirky characters, things other actors might have turned down. He didn't want to be the predictable Hollywood star. And because of that, the industry both loved and misunderstood him. When Pirates of the Caribbean exploded into a global phenomenon, Hollywood embraced him like never before. Captain Jack Sparrow wasn't just a character, it became a cultural symbol. Depp went from quirky outsider to box office king. Suddenly, everyone wanted him. Studios, directors, fans. But what happens when controversy enters the picture? When personal life collides with public image, Hollywood, as quick as it is to embrace, can also be quick to push away. Suddenly, roles that seemed certain disappeared. Projects that should have been guaranteed success slipped away. Studios distanced themselves. People who once celebrated him stayed silent. Again, that question, why come if you can't stay? Why build someone up if you're going to let them fall the second things get complicated? And then there's the fans. Now, Johnny Depp has one of the most loyal fan bases in the world. And let's be clear, many of them have stayed through everything. They've defended him, supported him, believed in him when the world seemed ready to write him off. They've packed courtrooms. They've flooded social media. They've shown him that some people do stay no matter how dark it gets, but even in fandom there are always those who disappear. Some who only cheer when you're winning. Some who want the highlight reel but not the behind the scenes. And isn't that just life? We all know people like that. Friends who are there for the party but not for the cleanup. People who stand by you in sunshine but vanish when it rains. And here's where it gets fascinating. Johnny doesn't just live through these cycles of arrivals and departures. He uses them. He turns them into art. This is something most people don't realize. For actors like Johnny, roles aren't just performances. They're expressions. They're ways of channeling personal experience into something that resonates. When you watch Captain Jack Sparrow stumble yet survive, barely holding things together but still winning in the end, that's not just a pirate. That's Johnny. That's a man who stumbled in real life, who's been chaotic, unpredictable, misunderstood, but somehow, against all odds, survived. Or think about Edward Scissorhands, a character who looks dangerous, who seems misunderstood, but who at his core just wants to connect, to be loved, to belong. That role wasn't just fiction. It was Depp putting his own feelings of being an outsider onto the screen. And audiences connected because they saw truth in it. That's why his performances hit differently. They're not just acting, they're lived experiences disguised as characters. They're fragments of his own scars, stitched together and offered to us. And maybe that's why his roles have stayed iconic, because they come from something real. Now, let's talk about loyalty. Because if, why do you come if you can't stay, is the painful question, then loyalty is the rare, precious answer. When you look at Johnny Depp's life, it's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind, the roles, the trials, the controversies, the headlines. But if you really want to understand him, if you want to see what grounds him when everything else seems unstable, you have to look at his friendships, especially the ones he's built in music. See, Johnny has always been more than just an actor. Long before he became a Hollywood icon, he wanted to be a musician. Acting was almost accidental. He picked up roles to pay the bills, and before long he found himself swept up into stardom. But at his core, music was his first love. The guitar was his safe place, his way of expressing what words couldn't always capture. And that love never left him. So when the chaos of Hollywood grew too loud, when the industry turned its back, when relationships crumbled, when the headlines got ugly, music became his refuge. But more importantly, the friends he made through music became his anchors. They weren't just temporary figures in his life. They weren't people who came in with noise and left with silence. They stayed. They showed up. They reminded him that not everyone comes only to leave, and two names stand out the most in this story: Alice Cooper and Jeff Beck. Now, Alice Cooper is a legend in his own right. Known as the godfather of shock rock, he's a man who built a career on outrageous performances, theatricality, and music that shook audiences to their core. On the surface, you wouldn't think he and Johnny would cross paths in such a deep way. But sometimes the unlikeliest friendships are the ones that last the longest. For Johnny, Alice Cooper wasn't just a rock star. He was a friend who looked past the Hollywood machine, past the gossip, and saw the person. And that's rare. Because when fame wraps itself around you, people often see the image, not the individual. But Alice didn't just see Johnny Depp, the movie star. He saw Johnny, the musician. Johnny, the man who still loved the guitar like he did at 16. Johnny, the friend who needed a place where he could belong without judgment. Together they formed a bond that was both creative and personal. Along with Joe Perry from Aerosmith, they started the band Hollywood Vampires. And this wasn't just a side project for laughs. This was a real band, a real creative outlet. For Johnny, it wasn't about proving anything to the world. It wasn't about box office numbers or critical reviews. It was about making music with friends. It was about rediscovering that pure joy that fame can sometimes steal away. And in Alice, Johnny found someone who stayed. Someone who stood by him when the world outside was complicated. Someone who didn't flinch when the headlines turned dark. That's the thing about music friendships. They aren't built on Hollywood contracts or studio deals. They're built on long nights in rehearsal rooms, shared laughter on tour buses, and the raw honesty that comes with playing music together. Then there's Jeff Beck. Jeff wasn't just another musician. He was one of the greatest guitarists to ever live. His influence shaped generations of music, and for Johnny, Jeff wasn't just an idol. He became a friend, a collaborator, and almost like a brother. Their bond grew deeper as they worked together, creating, performing, and connecting in ways that went beyond the stage. When Johnny was going through some of the darkest times in his life, Jeff Beck was there. And this is important, because loyalty isn't about showing up when things are easy. Anyone can do that. Loyalty is about showing up when things are hard, when the world is against you, when you have nothing to offer but yourself. And Jeff did that. Together, they even released an album blending Depp's songwriting and Beck's legendary guitar skills. It wasn't about topping charts or chasing commercial success. It was about two artists from different worlds finding common ground and healing through music. For Johnny, every note played alongside Jeff was more than music. It was therapy. It was a reminder that in a world where so many come and go, some bonds are unshakable. And think about the timing. When Hollywood seemed distant, when studios hesitated, Johnny still had a stage. He still had an audience, not as an actor, but as a musician. That's powerful, because it showed him, and maybe even showed the world, that he wasn't defined by one career, one image, or one set of headlines. He was more. He had music, and he had friends who stayed. Now, if you step back and look at this, it paints a fascinating picture. On one side, you see relationships that crumbled. Loves that once looked permanent but didn't last. Industry ties that dissolved the moment things got complicated. Fans and colleagues who disappeared when it wasn't convenient to stay. On that side of the story, you hear the question echo, why do you come if you can't stay? But then, on the other side, you see Alice Cooper. You see Jeff Beck. You see Joe Perry. You see the music world, where friendships weren't fleeting but loyal. Where creativity wasn't conditional but constant. Where people didn't just come and go, they stayed. They stood by him. They gave him stability in times when everything else crumbled, and that contrast is everything, because it shows us the two truths of life. One, that many people will come into your world only to leave, and two, that a precious few will remain. And those few matter more than anything. Think about your own life for a second. Haven't you felt that same contrast? Maybe you've had friends who vanished the second life got tough. Maybe you've had relationships that promised forever, only to last a season. Maybe you've seen co-workers or peers who supported you when things were good, but disappeared when things turned messy. But then, haven't you also had those rare people who did stay? The ones who didn't care about what you could offer, but cared about you? The ones who weren't scared away by your storms, but stood beside you through them? That's what Alice and Jeff represented for Johnny. And that's what we all need, a reminder that while many will come and go, a few, just a few, will stay, and when they do, they give you something no amount of fame or fortune can buy. Stability. A sense of belonging. Proof that loyalty exists. For Johnny, music friendships became that proof. They became the quiet, steady answer to his haunting question. Not everyone can stay, but some will. And those few are the ones who matter. That's why losing Jeff Beck in 2023 hit so hard. Jeff's passing wasn't just the loss of a music legend. For Johnny, it was the loss of a brother, a collaborator, a loyal friend. It was one of those rare people who had stayed. And even in grief, even in pain, it reminded Johnny, and all of us, of how rare and precious true loyalty is. Because here's the truth. Most people in life are temporary. They come in, they play their part, and they leave. But a handful will stay. And when you find them, you hold on. You cherish them. You protect that bond. Because in the end, that's what really carries us through. The ones who stay when everything else falls apart. So when Johnny Depp asks, Why do you come if you can't stay? The answer is painful but also powerful. Most will leave, but a few will stay. And those few, like Alice Cooper, like Jeff Beck, like the true anchors in your life, are worth more than anything else. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Don't waste too much energy on the ones who came and went. Instead, value the ones who stayed, because in the end, they're the ones who shape your story. So maybe, when Johnny asks that haunting question, it's not just bitterness. Maybe it's clarity, a recognition that most people won't stay. Most opportunities won't last. Most moments are temporary. But when something or someone does stay, that's where the true value is. That's where loyalty shines. And isn't that a lesson for all of us? Think about your own life. Haven't you had people come in, make promises, change everything, then leave? Maybe a best friend who drifted away. Maybe a love that burned bright and then burned out. Maybe even a job or an opportunity that felt like it was yours forever, until it wasn't. We've all had those moments. And we've all asked that same question in our own way. Why do you come if you can't stay? But haven't you also had people who did stay? The ones who stuck by you, even when things got ugly? The ones who didn't disappear when the storms rolled in? Those are the ones who prove that staying is possible. Those are the ones who remind us that not everything is temporary, and that's the real power of Johnny Depp's story. It's not just about him. It's about us too. His question is universal. His struggles mirror ours, and his ability to turn that pain into art reminds us that even in loss, even in disappointment, something beautiful can emerge. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had someone step into your life, change it, and then vanish? How did it shape you? Did it leave you with pain, or did it give you lessons you carry even now? Share your story, because sometimes, by sharing, we realize we're not alone in asking these questions. And if exploring this side of Johnny Depp gave you a new perspective, don't stop here. There's another story waiting for you. One that dives into his bond with Paul McCartney, a story about friendship, respect, and connection that did last. And you'll want to see how that unfolded. Before you go, if this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And share it with someone who loves Johnny Depp as much as you do. Because every like, every comment, every share helps us keep telling these stories. At the end of the day, life is full of arrivals and departures. Some people come into our lives and leave just as quickly. Others stay. And maybe that's the real answer to Johnny Depp's question. Not everyone can stay. But the ones who do, they're the treasures. They're the anchors. They're the proof that loyalty still exists in a world full of fleeting moments. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.